In a previous video with Manoel Ribeiro, a PhD candidate of the IC School at EPFL, we discussed how his research suggests a radicalization pipeline on YouTube towards more and more extreme contents. But how reliable was the classification of contents as extreme contents? How was it determined?
So there was a previous report from Data and Society, which is a NGO research institute, I believe. And they proposed they proposed a name called Alternate Influencer Network, which comprised a bunch of the channels that we had. And the term outright and outright, we used the definition from ADL, so Anti-Defamation League, which is like this famous NGO in the United States. And also the intellectual dark web is a term that was coined in the New York Times editorial. A bunch of people kind of self-identify as belonging to this group, so it was not a matter of us assigning. And then once we had like all these channels of interest, we used kind of like this snowball sampling method to expand our seed, and then we used some annotation method to classify which channel belonged to each community if they had not been already specified by one of these sources. So it was a very long and boring annotation process. In total, we had around 350 channels, which took around a week or so to annotate. So it was quite a lot of effort, because a lot of them, we had to manually go through them, and we had a methodology. We had to watch an X amount of it and so forth. We had 2 annotators and so on. Yeah. So it was huge pain.
Now let's discuss these communities in further details. How bad are actually these communities?
We calling these gateway communities, right? But it's hard to make any judgment over them. It's not like these communities are bad or that they intend to do harm or to radicalize people. Some people argue that some of the creators in these blurry areas are. But I believe that some people genuinely are caught into kind of like the social technical system, which leads them further to more radical content.
But do gateway communities encourage radicalization, or do they oppose it?
From the intellectual dark web, no one agrees with the alt-right. They're often critical of mainstream views, but I think it's very fair to say that they don't agree at all with the white supremacy and so forth. With the alt-right, it's a bit more tricky. So initially, and maybe it's even confusing, the term alt-right, because if we think about alt-right, we think about Trump election and Breitbart and so forth. But kind of they made the ADL trace this distinction, because after Charlottesville, the Unite the Right rally, kind of the term got associated with white supremacists, and a bunch of people kind of pushed themselves away from the term, right? Because it was I don't know, they didn't agree, or they didn't publicly agree with these views. And so basically I would say that some people in the alt-right, they have very very blurry opinions on some topics that could be interpreted as white supremacists. But it's not it's very clear. And it's also something that many people that work for these watchdogs says is that they're whistleblowers, right? Because they're trying to promote things that are associated with white supremacy, while kind of remaining acceptable, So it would be a bit adversarial. And I also have a preprint now on the manosphere, which is the manosphere, which is these groups of communities which are related to kind of men's issues and anti-feminism, and these are also known to be very toxic communities, and they're spread across the web. And a big challenge in studying them is that they are in so many places and so many different subreddits and so many different forums and YouTube channels and so forth. So in general, I guess not to enter in detail on another paper, but something I think it's very important is that there are these fringe communities online. It's been a while now, alt-right is one of them, but you have others, and having cells, for instance, which are a huge problem. These communities, although they're small, they're niche, they're super important, because they are responsible for a crazy amount of harassment and of real world violence and so forth.
So how generalizable do you think are the results to other countries? Or?
So I think it's hard to I think it's very non-generalizable in the sense that we studied these communities, right? So we studied these three communities and how they interact. And I'm Brazilian, right? So from what I see is that different countries, they have kind of like fringe movements that are rising, but they often come in different political scenarios and they have different details and so forth. So I would say that they are generalizable in the sense that we provide a framework where other people could study other movements, and that since that there is evidence that this is happening here, it's perhaps more likely that this is also happening in other places. But I think it's hard to, given that this is a measurement study, to say that this measurement applies to other communities, right? Because it wouldn't be fair.